Hey, George, you're a scientist.
I'm a chemist, yes.
Right, you're a scientist. So, we both have partners and kids. And so there's clothes and blankets and crap around our homes that are not ours. And men, like a lot of things we just benefit from in society, like our clothes tend to be pretty resilient. You just take everything you own and put it straight in the wash, and it's fine. But my partner, my kids, I assume this is probably true for you as well, is like some of their clothes are like, no, those are the special clothes. You got to put them aside. You got to do something different. And I've noticed one of the most consistent things you have to do different is don't put it in the dryer on high heat, which I don't have to use as much as I used to because I used to live in a super humid place and now I live in a super dry place. So I'm like less nervous about things not being fully dry than I used to be. But like, why? Like if I have like a polyester shirt or sweater or something, like why can't I just throw that in the dryer on high heat with everything else? Like what is going to cause it to shrink or warp or whatever sadness will ruin it?
What will cause it to be sad? Well, darn it, Lions, I am a analytical chemist, not a different type of chemist. But with my very limited knowledge and very limited expertise, I will attempt to opine to this.
Is different also a science word that has a colloquial meaning? Like, is there different chemistry?
Yeah, that'd be cool, though, man. Like, I feel like they'd be like the bad boy chemists, where they're like, I'm different chemist. And to be fair, when you look at quarks and they're named like up, down, strange, and charm, it'd be like, I mean, I don't know, maybe.
That's what I'm saying. Words can just mean any old thing, apparently.
That word's made up. All words are made up. No, the reason why I said other chemist is because if I said the type of chemist, it'd give the game away. First, let's start at the top. What is polyester?
Well, I'm going to assume that because it starts with poly, like the poly in PVC, like polyvinyl, that you've got like it's plastic, basically. It's plastic.
Yeah, we're wearing plastic. Absolutely.
Yeah, all the time.
Which is weird, right? Because like when you think of plastic, you think of like plastic toys and plastic cars and PVC, and it's just like, or clothes, and you're like, that doesn't sound right. But it is an ester that has been polymerized, right? So it is a plastic, and therefore is beholden to all of the things that plastics were. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take a step back and live in Lyons' naked classroom nightmare, because we just recently went over a bunch of stuff with polymers, and now I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions.
Awesome.
I'm going to see what your retention was.
The thing that will help bring down my anxiety a little bit about this is I edit the show. So unlike a real pop quiz, I can kind of make this sound however I want, but I will try to be as true to life as would still be interesting to listen to.
We know when it goes sideways, when it's just like, so Lions, how does this work? And you're like, well, George, I think that.
Yeah, if I suddenly sound like a character AI or ChatGPT or something, you will know it's gone totally off the rails.
Yeah, if Lion suddenly sounds like a hostage note, in audio form, like that's how we know. All polymers have a different character, the same like overall characteristics of like as you heat them, their modulus changes, right? So what is modulus?
So I will do all of the vocabulary wrong. So just tell you could put a 0 in the grade book for that right now, but
that's fine. And also too, I just realized that like after this episode, you're going to have a stronger grasp on all these concepts than like anyone,
Yes. Well, except other than all of our listeners.
Yes.
So we won't have to worry about ruining the curve for each other because we'll all get the same things right or wrong on the test. So the qualities that I remember about polymers is that as the temperature, there's like the temperature range that kind of defines like where it goes through its like state changes. So where it has like its glass state, there were other ones. And like those determine like how the material performs. So all you're doing with like different kinds of plastics is you're saying this performs this way and this temperature range, that one performs differently at a different temperature range, so that like you can have things that are flexible at room temperature or things that are solid at room temperature by changing like where that temperature range is. I know I completely skirted your question of like define this term, but I'm just laying out for you the parts of our previous conversation that I remember.
Yeah, no, that honestly, like, yeah, you didn't really answer the question of what is modulus, but you got to like the next three things I was going to mention. So like I would have given you like an 87, 89% on that. That was pretty good. Yeah, no, because you mentioned some of the key points and you did actually touch on what modulus is. You just didn't tie it to the definition, which is modulus is basically when you said the flexibility of the material, that's kind of modulus, right? So modulus is the stress over strain, which is like how much does the material warp versus how much energy do you have to put into trying to warp it.
Was the colloquial term used for that the grunt and groan?
Yep, grunt over groan. Yep. How much does the material? How much do you grunt as the material groans? Yep. You got it. So that's basically the modulus, and so the modulus curve. To your point, right, is that it starts off like a very high modulus at a very low temperature. All plastics, if you get to a low enough temperature, depending upon the type of plastic, right, determines where this ceases to be true. But they are all glassy. It is the glass state, the TG or glass transition temperature, right? So all plastics at very low temperatures are clear and brittle, right? Which means because they're so locked in, so they're big long molecules that are what are called entangled. So they're a big plate of spaghetti where all the spaghetti is all wrapped up together and now frozen, right? So it has no way to relieve stress. And that's going to be the key to this whole thing is how can the material relieve stress, right? So at very low temperatures, it's all kind of like locked in together. The only way it can relieve stress is to break, right? So when you shatter it, it shatters bonds. As you heat it up, now these big old molecules can get to moving and shaking a little bit, and then they can be more flexible because as you twist them, the molecules are actually able to move around each other. You know, they have enough energy in the system to do that. And then as you continue to heat it, it'll get warmer, and then eventually they'll have so much energy that they can melt, which is the melt temperature. And then they are now basically a viscous fluid, and they can all move around each other however you want. The other cool thing is that this is an entirely reversible process. So if you bring it into a melt and then you put it into a ball and then you cool it back down, it will stay now as a ball, right? Which I think is pretty cool. Questions thus far?
No, I do have one comment though. We already have terms for like, oh, this thing is, melting, and the opposite of that would be freezing. Right. And so
yeah.
It's like it's a liquid and the opposite is it's a solid. So I do think it's a little funny that it's like, oh, this has its melt point. So the opposite would be freeze point, glass point, you idiots. It just feels like a way to just see if someone actually did the reading.
Yeah. Right. And I think that it's because, that's interesting. And I'll think on this because I feel that freezing is slightly different than a glass transition temperature in a polymer. I think that they behave slightly differently.
Oh, I am certain that I am way over reducing this.
Yeah. No, but I mean, no, it's a fair point because also too, a lot of the times is that, especially with things that we've kind of discovered recently, is that they'll just be like, so a scientist or a series of scientists on the forefront will be like, this is what we called it when we were kind of learning about it. And then now this is what we call it, Like there's actually some of the graphs, and not to go too far into detail, but some of the graphs that deal with this, like you have to determine whether or not the process is endothermic or exothermic. And there is no convention as to whether one's positive or one's negative on these types of graphs. So they always have to say endo is up or endo is down, and because just for whatever reason, when they were developing this stuff, both were used with equal or semi-equal frequency. So they were like, I don't know, there's no convention.
It feels like a European Commission can get together and resolve that and just be like, okay, we decided it's always this way.
Yeah. And they probably could, but a part of me is just that like some scientists are a little bit gun shy after they decided that current goes in the direction that's opposite of the electron flow. And they're like, I don't know, I don't want to make that mistake again, man. So, as I mentioned, right, so as you increase the temperature, it becomes more and more flexible because they can move around each other and have different ways to relieve stress, right? And then when you push it back in the other direction, you remove that ability to relieve stress, So when they make polyester fibers, which I think is pretty cool, they create the polyester plastic, and then they heat it up a little bit. And what they do then is they pull on it to make this nice long fiber, right? Then what they do is they cool it back down, so now it's locked into place because it doesn't have any other way to relieve stress. But because the glass transition temperature for polyester is between 67 to 81 degrees Celsius, or between 155 to 178 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So that is more than high enough to keep it at below its glass transition temperature at room temperature, which is when 99% of the time, the temperature that the clothes are at. But if you heat it up, it starts to push it past its glass transition temperature, where it becomes more amorphous, right? And a little bit more leathery. And now it has new ways to relieve stress, which includes shrinking back down into its non-stressed state, which is why it shrinks in the dryer, because you've heated it up and given it the ability to relieve its stress, which it then does, because physics doesn't care if you have a shirt the right size.
Well, and I think there was something really critical in there that I realized I had both never thought about before and then immediately got the answer to, which is nice, which is when they make the polyester material, they stretch it into fibers, right? Meaning it is under stress to be at fiber length. It is not like at rest, so that when it gets more energy into it and it becomes more fluidy, more like nobody gets to see your cool shoulder motions except me, but you do a little shoulder roll when you talk about that. Then it is specifically going to a more natural state to relieve the stress, which is why you don't ever have something heat up in the dryer and get bigger, right? It doesn't stretch out. You could, if you put mechanical energy into it, right? If you heat it in the dryer and then took it out and then like pulled on it, you could maybe stretch it because you're applying that mechanical energy. But under just like natural conditions, it wants to be, I don't know, in some smaller state, right? Like the fibers want to shrink back down because the stress state is the elongated state that they used to make the garment with. And I didn't realize I had the question, why doesn't it ever stretch out unevenly, right? Like why does one sleeve not get like long and weird? Because it's not melting, right? Like when if you leave like an army man like on the driveway and put a magnifying glass over him, like you're not just taking something that is in one shape and melting it into a puddle. You are putting enough energy into it that it says like, okay, I'm going to now use this energy to go back to where I want to be, which is under less stress, which is smaller. I wonder if you could cheat that like with a different manufacturing process for the fibers. Like, could you make their stretched out state the comfortable state so you had like non-shrinking polyester? Did I just come up with $1 million idea?
So I think that the answer is one of two things to that question. One, no, or two, either one, no, it has to be stretched in order to be in a fiber, or two, yes, you could, but the amount of polyester that you would need to do that would be so much greater that it would not be cost effective, So, one, that, and two, actually to your point, right, is that, so this process is a lot of the times when you make something out of plastic, right, is you like inject it into a mold, right? So you heat it up, you then stretch it into this mold, and then you cool it back down, right? So that's also why some plastic bottles, which the type of plastics they are escape me at the moment, you can't put them in the washing machine, because when the washing machine heats up to dry it, the whole bottle will shrink down. And actually, I got to see it at one point where somebody put a 1 liter plastic bottle in the machine, in the thing, and it came out at like 100 mils. It was this tiny little thing. By the time, it looked exactly like the bottle did before, right? Is I was just kind of like, oh, so if you want mini bottles, like all you got to do is just put them in the washing machine. But yeah, so that is why.
Is this how Shrinky Dinks work?
It is exactly how Shrinky Dinks work. Yes.
Yay! Yep. I translated knowledge.
Yep, 100%. And the reason why I know for sure that that's the case is because all of this came up in my polymer chemistry course. And when he mentioned the polyester thing, I raised my hand and said, is this how Shrinky Dinks work? And he said, yes. So Great minds.
That's right. Oh man, this reminds me of other childhood toys I want to ask you about.